Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you know, here we talk about graphics design and the rest of everything about design. So I want to address an issue that I've been seeing constantly online for a while right now, and which is the issue of design software. So we have a lot of softwares that we use for design. There is Adobe Photoshop, there's Adobe Illustrator, there's Pixel Lab, there is Canva, there is a whole lot of softwares that you can use. There's CorelDRAW and the rest of them. But then the misconception that we have is that we don't do everything with just one software. For instance, now when we talk about branding or flyer designs that is going to pass through the printing process, you don't use something like Photoshop, because I see a lot of people try to kill themselves using Photoshop. You only know how to use Photoshop, and then at the end of the day, you discover that once you are done with your designs, they look very pixelated, and it's not going to be good for production. Or you are doing a book work, for instance, a magazine, a brochure, and you decide to use Photoshop. I'm not saying that Photoshop cannot be able to do it. At least Photoshop has artboards, but then that it has artboard does not mean that it is meant for it. And I've seen some people use Photoshop to do UI UX, design interfaces for websites and mobile applications. And these things are actually wrong because they don't really serve that purpose. It's just like having a smartphone, and then your smartphone, you can make call with it, you can browse the internet, you can record with it. That does not, you can't compare it to a video camera or a digital camera that is actually meant for this thing. So now we're going to be breaking this down and looking at the Nigeria ecosystem and how our economy has been. So we're going to be looking at some things that we can put in mind. First, one of the problems that we have is access to a laptop. Access to a laptop. I can tell you that I started design with a Dell Latitude that had only 512 MB of RAM, megabytes of RAM, with 80 gig of hard disks, and that was around 2015. So you can imagine someone that is doing design as of that time. I didn't have access to tutors that could teach me Photoshop, Illustrator, and the rest of them, InDesign and all these things. But then I started off with CorelDRAW. I discovered Photoshop, but there was nobody to put me through Photoshop. So you can imagine someone that is in this situation now, or someone that does not even have access to a laptop, but you have a smartphone. But then you don't want to start your design process because you feel like you need a laptop to start. But funny enough, when you get your first laptop, if it's not a gaming system or a workstation, you discover that it begins to lag at a particular time. Now you have a phone, and that is an Android phone, and you have access to Pixel Lab, for instance. Now you will be like, oh, I can't use Pixel Lab for professional work. And to tell you the truth, your clients do not care about the software you use. That's just the truth. One, they don't care, except you are applying for a firm that requires you to use a particular software. They don't care about it. So if you use, for instance, Pixel Lab to make your designs, you can actually look at it in this way, that okay, I get my Pixel Lab, I do my design, I can bring in things like Snapseed or Lightroom, to add camera raw filters to all this and to make it look pop out and all these things. But it is a step into the game. So once you've been able to access this thing, you begin to grow, you make more money, you now talk about buying a laptop. Then I advise, based on my own reference, I'm not saying this is the standard, but I advise that you start with Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW. Now, Adobe Illustrator and CorelDRAW, they are the same. But the reason why I will prefer you use Illustrator is that Adobe ecosystem has a way of integrating itself. For instance, now when I'm working on my Illustrator, maybe I'm designing a brand or something I'm working on, I can easily click on edit in Photoshop, and it takes me to my Photoshop, and I edit my photo and touch it up, you understand, and all this is, and still bring it back to Illustrator to continue my work. But if you're using a CorelDRAW, for instance, CorelDRAW has what we call Corel Paint that is should be similar to Photoshop, but it can't keep up to. We all know that Photoshop is very robust. It's not as advanced as Photoshop. So if you can learn Illustrator, use Illustrator for your branding, you design your logos, your flyers, your brochure. If it's possible for you to also learn InDesign, it's still okay. But if you can't, if your system that you have cannot be able to make use of Photoshop or is not a high-end system, you can now switch to CorelDRAW. Start from there. So from there now you can now decide to move up to Photoshop. As I use Photoshop to design flyers, but then there is a kind of flyer that I design with Photoshop, and there's a kind of flyer that I design with Illustrator. I understand what my clients need. For instance, now a flyer that is going to pass through offset printing, I don't use Photoshop. I use Illustrator or CorelDRAW. But for something that will be posted online, I use something like Photoshop to design it, or even still Illustrator, depending on what I am looking for. That is something you should look out for. And then you should always have something in mind. It is not the tool that make you more creative. I know that when you have access to a good gadget and access to the right tool, it can help you in a way. But necessarily, it's not really important about the design software you use particularly. It's about your creativity. How creative are you? How can you be able to come up with a design that solves solution? Because design is not only about how it looks, but it is what it does, the function, what it can be able to do. So once you can be able to get, follow people on Pinterest or Instagram, look at the designs of people, what is so spectacular about their design? You begin to learn from it. You replicate what they've been able to do. From that process, you are learning. For someone like me, I didn't have access to tutors, and I was able to learn off from YouTube and grow myself. You can imagine from that stage. It is a process. So you begin to work on your creativity. I've seen someone that created the flyer on Pixel Lab, and the design is not better than someone that used Photoshop. Some people know how to use Photoshop, but they are not creative enough to make something that is functional, something that is very pleasing to look at. So these are things you need to really look at. One, I know that design tools are very important, but then your creativity, invest in it. And there's also one thing that can also make you stand out. We call it spiritual intelligence. It is above artificial intelligence. I use AI in my work process, my workflow. I have used it a lot. But then I do not take out the place of spiritual intelligence, in the sense that we have what we call creative block. There are days that you don't have, there's no strength for you to think about what to do. You can't come up with a concept. That's why you need the Holy Spirit. I know for some of us that are not Christians, it can sound a little funny, but I'm telling you the truth that the Holy Spirit helps you in creativity. I've been in a space where I was sick, I was working, and then my boss at that moment told me, Emmanuel, there's a reason why I gave you this task. I trust that you can deliver. So now, what is so spectacular about that thing? That knowing that I'm fully sick, but please, we still need you on this project. Please, can you help us? We trust that you can deliver. It's not that I am the most creative person in the whole world that can design, but I trust the Holy Spirit in my design process. He can give you ideas of where to look out for, what to do, what to implement. And there's what we call in the word creativity in itself is create and thief. So we look at something, we steal it, and we make it look more original. And you know that nobody creates something out of their own head. You are inspired by something. So it's the Holy Spirit that can actually help you to look at something, see the inspiration in some things, and build something that stands out, something that the world will look at and be like, wow, so this guy can actually build this kind of thing. And it is not a brainer. So I believe that with these little points I've been able to drop, that you can actually understand that it is not per se the softwares. They are important, but it's not really what really matters. And you can be able to understand that when you want to design a job, you should be able to understand the job and know the tool to use for that particular job. And also not to forget the place of the Holy Spirit, because if the Holy Spirit helps you, I'm telling you that you can design something that, sometimes as a designer, we can design something, there's this perfectionist something that comes to your mind. I don't think this is really good, but the client can see and be like, wow, this is really what we are looking for. I can't, this is what I actually want. You understand? So I think, yeah, we'll call it a day. See you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, share this video. Thank you and goodbye.